I feel like I need to do something, for my community. How can I use all of my resources to, I have the perfect idea. Wait, feels too familiar. Been there, done that. I want a different vibe. This is way too cramped. Nah, a little too formal. Kind of like the Last Supper. Nope. Hello there, I'm Renee. Nah, that's a different show. Hey y'all, welcome to Situations and Conversations, where we aim to empower, enlighten, educate, elevate, and entertain. Now, I am your host, Renee, and I so appreciate you for joining us today. Let's get into the situation, and it's easy. It's Black History Month, so we are celebrating. But believe it or not, there are some situations around this celebration. One question that a viewer sent is, how should we celebrate Black history? Well, you'll be very happy to know that I called on one of my good friends, Dr. Shirley Jackson, who is a professor of sociology at Portland State University, to come and talk to us about all things Black history. Welcome, Dr. Jackson.
Always a pleasure to see you.
I know. I'm so happy that you could make it.
Yes, definitely. It feels good to be outside.
I know. And it's so crazy, especially now. It's Black History Month.
Yes.
Normally, we might be having some outdoor celebrations. And so when someone says, how do we celebrate Black History Month, especially during this pandemic, what would you say to that?
There are so many television shows, movies. Everybody is trying to put something out there right now so that people are informed. They know what movies are out there that are the classic Black films,
right,
the newer ones. And then you also can find places that list Black books that are must-reads.
Okay, yeah. I don't read as much as I should anymore.
I think what it is that you have to find authors and books that really grab you and speak to you. So for me, I have to say one of my favorite books for many, many years has been Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a classic.
And I think The Bluest Eye works for people of all ages. Mm-hmm. So even if you have kids, they work, for really young ones, but they work for people of other, age groups as well. I have to say, though, one of my other favorite books.
You must be serious, because you're giving me an eye right now.
It's nonfiction, and that book is by Harriet Washington, and it's called Medical Apartheid. Ooh. And it focuses on the dark history of medical experimentation on Blacks from the colonial era to the present.
And that leads into a conversation that we're going to have about Black mental health, because there's a lot of trauma in our history around that, and you only know these things if you learn about them.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to celebrate Black history and to know the history. But let me ask you, it may sound like a strange question, but how would you describe Black history?
It's American history.
Okay. It is indeed.
It's American history. And I say that because there are people who seem to assume that if you take a course that is your average, say, history course, whether it's in high school, whether it's in college, that you will not have anything about Black people unless there is a discussion of slavery and then the civil rights movement.
Yep.
As though Black people did not exist in periods outside of those two. So when I say Black history is American history, I do mean that. I do mean that, when we talk about it, when we are looking at, the possible topics that one could be including in a course in the humanities, courses in literature, courses in psychology, sociology, economics, health. There's so many. Black people should be included in those.
Absolutely. Let's have a real conversation. We've had these conversations behind the scenes for many years, but let's have it out here in the open.
Yes.
If Black history is American history, then why is it that when I was coming along in school and my kids are now coming along in school, and I'm not talking about college education, because there's a lot of options when you go to college, right? I'm talking about the basics. American history classes that are going on right now do not include Black history as it relates to anything other than what you just said, slavery and civil rights movement. There's a lot to celebrate, and a lot to know that people use right now, take advantage of every day, don't even realize it, like the GPS. That's right, GPS, Black woman. Am I lying?
Traffic light, so
I mean, how many things you use every day you don't even know, right? But we learn all about the light bulb. Not to say we don't like light bulbs. I like light. But I also like a lot of other things.
But it depends on the school that you went to.
Okay, true, because I did not go, disclaimer, I did not go to any predominantly Black schools at all in my entire educational career.
Yes.
I was always I lived in neighborhoods that were not predominantly at all people of color. Schools were the same way. And unfortunately, I guess I've repeated that same pattern for my own kids, not knowing when I moved here from the Bay Area and from New York and where I was coming from, that where I was living was where I was living. I was a little bit more woke. So had I known what I know now about the areas, I would not necessarily be living in my neighborhood, although I like my neighbor. Shout out to my neighbor. Shout out to, but it's just, it doesn't reflect at all us. And so there's a lot of trauma that comes along with that when your kids are going to school, and trauma that's been like, I'm re-triggered from my own time in school. And having to answer these questions. Oh, is it Black History Month?
But see, that's just it. So I went to 3 different high schools.
Okay.
And the first high school that I went to, I thought that high school was really diverse. It's funny, I go back and I look at my, just high school yearbook, and it was diverse. It really was. There were probably more people of color than I had initially assumed. In particular, there were more Black people there.
Wow.
But it was diverse.
Okay.
The second high school that I went to had more white students. But interestingly, my family wasn't actually in the district. Okay. Although the school was probably just a few blocks away, we weren't in the district, so we were supposed to walk about a mile and this was actually across the tracks.
Oh, really? Literally across the tracks?
Yes, literally across the tracks to a Black high school, predominantly Black high school. And at that high school, I did have teachers and I did have course materials that I was assigned that actually did focus on Black people. So I read, when I was in high school, the autobiography of Malcolm X.
You did?
Yes, because that was required reading for one of my classes, for my English class, English Lit. And,
wow.
And I had a Black teacher who was a biology instructor. So I had those kinds of people who I could look to. And I didn't really have this sort of understanding that Black history and Black people weren't doing things.
Wow.
But there is a big difference, as you said, depending on, where you live.
Yeah.
If you are in a place like Oregon, the chances are you're not going to have very diverse curriculum. You're not going to have a good deal of diversity in your teachers if you are living in a place that isn't diverse.
No, it's so true. We got to move. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. That's not the answer. No, but really, we do need to do better in our school systems. And college level is a little bit different. That's where I got exposed to a lot more. And that's when I call myself getting in my awakening stages, because I wouldn't say I was fully woke. I'm still not. I have to learn a lot. There's still a lot, out here. I mean, Black history is, it's like, you can't even begin. So the fact that it's only, 28 days out of the year is like, okay, do we have to just take what we can get? Because how did it start? Did it start as a day or a week?
It started, so there was a Black History Week. So that week was in recognition of, hey, we need to be having some focus on, Black folks and some idea of Black history. So you had this development of this week-long celebration that then ended up being a month.
Okay.
But the week-long celebration was actually in February because of the birthdays that happened to be in this month. So,
Oh.
looking at it in terms of like President's, weekend or President's holiday and that sort of thing. So kind of putting that in there and, just looking at George Washington Carver, all of these people who, John Hope Franklin, all of these folks who needed to be recognized for the things that they had been doing. So why not choose this particular month?
Nice. Okay.
Again, start as a month and then becomes a week. So it
No,
wasn't
started off as a
intentional.
week and then
Yes,
started,
it started as a week and then became a month.
Yeah.
But it didn't. But it wasn't like this intentional, effort to like downplay Black folks' activities or their histories, because it was Black folks who actually started it.
Okay, good. Because, the running joke is like, okay, so Black folks have to get the shortest month of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
and that's what, but the thing is, that's why I also say, though, that Black history is American history. So although there is this focus for 1 month, where, let's just be honest, you even have, when schools were in, you would have schools that would suddenly start putting on the menus, soul food.
Right.
As though all Black people ate the same kind of foods,
Right.
which,
It's so
depending on where
presumptuous.
they live, they may not have.
Right.
But you also have this understanding of, we have to do this thing for this month, as though the following month or the month before, Black people weren't really that relevant, unless you were talking about slavery and the civil rights movement.
That's right. Other than those two, that's it, right? So I guess, we'll take what we can get for now. But seriously, we all need to start practicing everybody. It's American history, everybody's history. A lot has contributed to where we are today.
And we also need to be thinking about, when we talk about history, are we just simply limiting ourselves to a discussion of history in terms of the way that we learn about history, where it's like dates and events?
Right, because I can't remember that stuff.
Right.
I'm not going to lie.
Exactly. So it has to be something that is more inclusive and it has to be meaningful in the way that it's taught. So I didn't really care to know a lot about history unless it made sense to me to want to know that information, So if somebody said something about different revolutions that were occurring or different movements around the world, it didn't really matter to me if you talked about the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution, because my eyes would just glaze over and I would just simply be looking at you trying to keep my eyes open with toothpicks, holding them open.
Exactly.
But if you linked it to something else and you talked about, say, the Black Power movement or the Black Liberation movement, you talked about the Civil Rights movement, you talked about the, apartheid movement, those kinds of things historically made much more sense to me. So it was relevant. It was relevant.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You have to have a connection. Let me ask you, what do you think about our current social and political climate? What do you think that says about our history and the role of privilege?
Some people clearly have more privilege than do others, don't
yes,
they?
Absolutely. I mean, and it's more and more obvious every day now that everybody has, cameras and everybody's having to sit it down for a little while and pay attention to the world a little bit more. I think it's been blatantly obvious for some, but it's really obvious now.
I think one of the best ways to think about it is what we see happening is evidence that what we thought had happened after the civil rights movement was just simply mythical. The civil rights movement certainly was important. But does that mean that once the civil rights movement, quote unquote, ended for some people, especially with the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., that we had done all that we needed to do? Clearly, the job was not done. There was so much more that needed to be done. But once you have a charismatic leader such as King, who is no longer, alive, what then happens to all of these things that were left undone, that were left unaddressed? So when King was trying to, help sanitation workers have a living wage, a livable wage, that particular battle was one that was never quite finished, if you will, because of his assassination.
Right.
The struggles that, people were having dealing with, housing insecurity, the poor people's movement that was taking place in Washington, D.C. with Resurrection City and so forth, bringing attention to the high cost of housing and the fact that there was homelessness occurring. People act as though homelessness and housing insecurity is new. It is not new.
It's not new, no.
It is not new. He was addressing it. Other people were addressing it also, much, decades ago. But we never really finished.
Can we ever really? When I think about it, I just feel like civil rights, and people confuse this all the time. Civil rights don't mean just Black people and white people getting together and getting along. Civil rights, like the basics, right? Like you said, home insecurity, food insecurity,
Yes.
all these things. That's what civil rights means. That's what he was fighting for. All of us are fighting for, in addition to making sure that we get, our fair share, right? But it's all encompassing. So for me, I feel like those kind of works, and that never stops.
It doesn't.
It can't ever stop, because America's not founded on that principle,
Right.
of making sure that
Right.
everybody,
Right.
everybody has what they need.
This country was founded on inequity. It was founded on the taking of land. It was founded on having other people work for you for free.
Right.
And you reap the benefits, you reap the rewards.
That's right.
So we were not founded to be a country where people were equal.
And that's why it's important to know all the history.
Yes.
Because if you didn't know that, then you would think you can get out here, and that you're thinking everything's for the taking. I'm good. I can do whatever I want. No, wait.
Not so fast.
Wait a minute. There are laws and systems in place from the very beginning that are going to help prevent certain people from doing certain things. But if you don't know that, you're going to get out here and beat your head against the wall and try and figure out. There's ways that you can progress, of course, but you have to know the history, which is why this is so important. Okay, I have to go to one of our viewers. It's a young person wanting to ask a question about Black history. Let's find out what she has to say.
Hey Trey, my question is, why is Black History Month only for a month?
Oh, she wants to know why Black History Month is only for a month.
Well, as I said, it's 365 days a year as far as I'm concerned. And that actually is a tagline that comes from a radio show that used to air, the Tom Joyner Morning Show.
Oh, yeah.
And they would always talk about Black history is 365 days a year. And whenever I would hear that, I would think, well, yes, of course it is. It really is.
Well, it should be, but here's the question then. So how can we make sure that it is? You have to incorporate that into your homes, right? Like
Yes.
Parents and siblings have to have conversations, and not just in Black households,
Yes.
in all households. Because like you said, Black history is American history.
And it also has to take place in the schools.
Yep, well, we
Right.
already talked about that.
So in Oregon, and I believe it will start this fall, the state of Oregon was the first in the country to pass a bill that ethnic studies be incorporated into the social studies curriculum from grades kindergarten through 12.
Shut up! It happened?
Yes. Yes.
Can we get some applause for that? Now, I know that you worked on that. You
Yes.
have been a champion for this. We talked about this.
Yes.
And I always felt like this is such a dream. I felt like I have a dream. But I just never thought it was actually, it's going down.
This is going to happen. So they actually had a couple of blips, if you will, because of the pandemic.
Sure.
But right now, all of this, they've got some things out there, the learning outcomes, all of those we worked on quite a while ago now, it seems.
I know, it's
Yes,
forever ago.
and we made sure that we did that so that when you talk about ethnic studies being included, it's just not, throwing out these really difficult terms and facts and figures out to little kids and just expecting them to know, what this all means. No,
Yes.
it has to be grade appropriate.
Okay.
So starting out with kindergartners and every single grade, having this incorporated. And I think what's really interesting is when you start looking at the middle school and high schoolers, it is included in certain types of classes that they'll be taking. So they
good.
are, the teachers actually have to really know how they can incorporate this information into the curriculum. So if you're talking about economics, for example, there are things that we expect that teachers will be talking about that will include ethnic studies. There has to be this diversity there. So that to me, I think, is a big step. And you have other states that are trying to do the same thing. So it's special for us.
I was gonna say,
given the
wait
state's
a minute,
history.
we're at the forefront of this?
Right. Yes.
I mean, because I don't know if y'all know, but Oregon, that was like a seriously segregated state.
Yes.
Like, seriously. Peculiar Paradise. Read it. I did read that.
And that's what makes this so unique. So there are other states that are looking to see how we've done it, because whereas you have places like California and even up in Washington State, cities are talking about doing this. Cities may also be focusing on just high school. We've actually taken it to the point where it's statewide, and it's all grades.
That is awesome. Oh, I can't wait. I'll let you know how it goes, because I still have 3 kids in the school system, and at all levels. I mean, elementary, middle, and high school.
And imagine what this will mean for them when they get to college.
I can't, because I literally cannot imagine it, because it's not in my reality. I had to get to college to actually then be exposed that, oh man, this is a class, like people teach that, what? Not just handed down from my dad and my grandmother, which is good stuff. It's good stuff. It's a little tainted. A little tainted, but it's good. It's still good. So, you do have to man, I got a history for you. My Black history. Something else. We'll talk about that another time.
I was looking for a story just
Girl,
now.
I could tell you some things. Let's just put it like, I'm gonna give you a little carrot, a little dangling in front of you. My grandmother in the Deep South, she killed a white man in the Deep South way back. And there's a whole story around that. It was not murder. I don't come from a murderous, line of people. It was self-defense. But can you imagine killing a white man in the Deep South of Louisiana? This is how I ended up on the West Coast. Let's just say that. We'll save that story for another day. But when I tell you I got handed down some history, and then when I got to college, I was like, wait, there are actually people teaching this stuff? Like, really teaching it? I was blown away. And so it's not enough, to get it handed down from your own people.
Well, I've got a story for you.
Oh, do tell.
It's a brief one.
Do tell.
So many people, when they hear the story about Rosa Parks, they only think about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. But way before that particular event, Rosa Parks was working for the NAACP as an investigator for the crime of rape against Black women.
What?
So Rosa Parks was investigating. She would actually go to different women who had accused primarily white men of rape, and she was the one who was putting together these reports for the NAACP.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Did you know that? Did you? Anybody know that?
If you look up the story of Recy Taylor, R-E-C-Y, her story is chronicled in a book, The Dark End of the Street, I think is the name of the book. That story talks about Rosa Parks and talks about her background and her family and what have you. And I think that to me was this moment of, wanting my students to hear more about Rosa Parks.
Yes.
Than just that one moment of her activism, because it was a type of activism that was so impactful for Black women and their safety.
Yes.
And to have this woman doing that kind of work and not being recognized for it, I think is just simply inexcusable.
Well, no excuses now. The people know about it now. We know about it now. Thank you for that is, see, that's what I'm talking about. We don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to another viewer. Let's see. We have another viewer with another question.
Hey Trey, the question I have is, what would be the best ways to celebrate and showcase Black history with the kids beyond the month of February?
Okay, Miss Shannon laid out the question.
You know, I actually think one of the things that is really fun is to have kids talk about the things that matter to them. And then you start exploring how you can find interesting ways to expand upon that. So let's say they have an interest in chemistry.
Okay.
Now, my mother was smart. My mother gave my sisters and I a chemistry set when we were growing up.
Oh, wow.
And she took away the Bunsen burner.
I would imagine she probably didn't want y'all burning the house down.
She knew us. And she knew what could possibly happen. But to have kids, you know, understand that there are people who look like them who might be interested in the same thing.
Oh, I see.
So here's where, I just happened to see that this film was on the other night, Hidden Figures.
Oh, yes.
If you have a child that is interested in building things, or a child that's interested in science, or a child that's interested in poetry, whatever it is, if there is something that you can share with them that makes them even more interested so that you can support that child in those endeavors, that goes far beyond the month of February. If your child is interested in science, again, have them sit down and perhaps watch Hidden Figures. Work with them on some science project, or even get them involved in a program that is designed specifically for children who are interested in the STEM fields. And there are some that focus on children who are from BIPOC communities. So
no, you're not kidding. And I think with the explosion of the movie Hidden Figures, a lot of the STEM programs opened up to a lot of people of color and kids of color.
Yes.
I started seeing a lot more, which is why I think this medium is so powerful, right? Because people they like to watch. They like to listen, they like to watch. And so if you can sneak in some, good stuff in there and plant some seeds for future growth, I think it's incredible. And so I guess I'm not doing enough with my little Black History Month flashcards. So I guess I better find another way to keep connecting all 365 days.
And then look for those, there are different websites that will oftentimes have like books for children of different ages and young adults. These are for adults based on, the classics, the must reads. Again, like I said, I love Toni Morrison, and I love all of her books. But for me, The Bluest Eye just spoke volumes. I'm still just.
Yeah, we can tell how much
I love that book. I love that book.
Well, again, I'm talking to you. I've learned many things. I need to get back into more reading. I need to model it for my kids, and then I need to get them off the tablet so much and off the devices and more reading books. I appreciate you for that. Okay, before we go, this is my little fun time.
Uh-oh.
So I did ask you about your pet peeves. And this is hilarious to me. So Dr. Shirley Jackson has some pet peeves for y'all. The first one is when people wear masks below their nose.
Oh my goodness.
Does that bother anybody else? Is that so annoying? It's like, what's the point, right?
It is. It's like, what's the point? You're breathing in all of the germs through your nose. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then these people will say, I don't know how I got sick. I wear a mask.
Yeah, down here. So funny. It's not a chin strap. I totally get it. That's so funny. Here's another one that I understand, but for those who are not necessarily of the culture or been around the culture, you may need to explain this. Your other pet peeve is folks who talk out of the sides of their neck. The crew's laughing because we all know what that means, right? Like, we've heard that way too many times. You better don't come over here. I don't like her because she talk out the side of her neck. What does that mean?
It refers to people who say one thing and they really don't mean it. They're full of you know what.
You can say it, but it's okay.
They may be people who love to just tell falsehoods. They may be two-faced.
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, I don't want to hear it. I don't have time for that.
Body language speaks volumes, y'all. I mean, it's like none of that. Put that over there. Put that 6 feet away with double mask on over the nose. Okay, and then this is a real one though, but you say you really can't stand, it's a pet peeve, fake social justice allies.
Yes.
What does that? Well, I hear some amens in the back.
I think living in the Portland area has taught me a lot about how some people are really fake when it comes to their ideas about what social justice means. What they really want to say, but can't, is that social justice applies only in the way in which they define it and the way in which they see it. And if you don't agree, then something must be wrong with you because you don't see it their way.
Right.
So as a Black woman, if I have a difference of opinion, it's amazing how people will interpret that to be a character flaw rather than the fact that I've had different experiences because I am a Black woman.
Thank you.
I am not a man. I am not white. I am a Black woman. So the way that I see things and, the way that I view the world, that is because of what I am and the experiences that came with that.
Ooh. I thought you were going to say, I am a Black woman and I come with a very special set of skills.
I was going to say, I don't want to say that I am woman, hear me roar kind of thing, Helen Reddy's old song. But I do think it's important to really recognize how oftentimes when people in this region talk about social justice, they do not include Black women.
Well, not today. Not today. That is the conversation. That's happening.
Yeah.
Now
we are not really included in that conversation. And I find that really troubling because if something happens to Black women, there is no one who is paying attention to it in the way in which we are paying attention to it because we see it happening to us and our sisters.
Yep.
But for people who believe that social justice is only about, say, Black men and Black men's encounters with law enforcement and not Black women's encounters with law enforcement or Black women's encounters with white people in general, I think that we have some problem there in terms of interpretation of social justice and what it means.
Definitely some work to do. Listen, I'm here for it. You know that. I'm here for it. As my kids would say, I want all the smoke. Bring it all. Bring it all right here to situations and conversations. We're going to have that conversation and then some. Thank you so much for being here.
You are very welcome.
So good to see you. I hope you come back.
I will.
Okay, good. All right, you guys, man, that's going to do it for this episode of Situations and Conversations. I hope you were able to get some nuggets because I certainly learned quite a bit. I'll be taking back with me. Thank you very much. And thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Listen, in the meantime, if you have a situation or a conversation you want to have a conversation about, well, then hit us up. Social media, you can drop your comments below. And until we meet again, please take good care of yourselves and others. And when you think me, think we. See you next time. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.